Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 12 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we know we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Why? Because we don't hear the opening theme at the beginning of the episode. Kind of like last year with Exade, once they got rid of the opening theme, we know we're moving into an area where we need a lot of plot development. In order to do that, we need to recover last week's episode and what happened with Sawa. So we see that Sawa manages to give us a lot more information about context with episode 1, specifically that she did not accidentally stumble upon Build HQ because the door was left open by Soichi. She snuck in. She knew where it was because she was already given that information by Nanba. What we're finding out here is that Nanba actually has a lot more juice with Faust and with the government than we originally thought. So it seems he's actually the bigger evil here, not Faust. Admittedly, Faust is where we're getting all of the smash and monsters and problems that we have, but Nanba seems to have a lot bigger grasp on everything than we originally thought, which I like. Now the reason for that being is that it turns things on its head. Usually the evil organization is the end-all be-all for any Rider series. From Shocker to Foundation X, that's the big thing that has to be defeated by the end of the series, is the evil organization. But turning it all back to one man, one businessman, to be the person that we have to defeat here, that's very interesting, and I do want to see where they go with this. Now tying into this, we do see that Nanba is actually moving a lot more things, and we see him doing a lot more, giving a lot more orders, specifically in this episode to Utsumi. Now we saw Utsumi there back in episode 1, and I kind of already had him pegged for a villain. Now we don't know if he's specifically working for Faust in general or under Nanba. All that's being brought into question now, but we do see that he's getting ready to play a much bigger part, at least in this episode, maybe further on in the series. Now we do see in our first fight between Build and Ryuga versus Night Rogue and Bloodstark that we're starting to see this duality between the two riders and how they approach things. We see that Sento takes a step back to let Ryuga step up and become more of the rider he's meant to be. Now mind you, we can't call him Cross yet, they haven't officially named him, but they'll cover that at the end of the episode. But for right now, it's interesting that for most of the characterization, Ryuga's on point, but in this particular episode, Sento was made to be a lot more comical. Not that he hasn't done this comical stuff before, it's just in this episode they really pushed it to the forefront, and I'm not sure why that was. Now admittedly, there's a lot of seriousness to be dealt with in this episode, and I guess they felt that they needed the comic relief, but I think that would have made more sense coming from someone like, say, Misora, where we see more of that carefree nature or comical, aggressive nature. But with Sento, him having all of this comical stuff while all of this serious stuff is going around him, I get the juxtaposition that they're trying to go for, but in this particular circumstance, we need him to be more of a hero. Now it's interesting that in this fight we actually get the debut of Pirate Train Best Match way before the end of the episode, where normally that would come along. Now they do have a proper fight later on in this episode, but I guess it made sense that during this fight we needed some kind of extra push to give Build and Ryuga the edge over Night Rogue and Bloodstark. The thing of it is, there's not much to it, and this has been a complaint I've had for the last couple of episodes, is that these best matches don't really change anything. It seems that Build should be able to take on everything based on what they're dealing with. Night Rogue and Bloodstark aren't getting any stronger. The riders are supposed to be the ones getting stronger, but I can't see any sort of definitive strength building in Build. Now Ryuga, on the other hand, yes, they're actually building that up, and we see that there's been a progression, but with Build, he's kind of always at the same level. Now after this fight is concluded, we see that we're dealing with a lot more backstory with Sawa. Namely, the reason she's doing all of this investigative journalism and spying is she actually wants revenge for her father, who was killed in a government cover-up several years ago with Nanba and Faust, so she does have her reasons for doing this. I do appreciate that during a chase sequence they give her in the middle of the episode, they actually have the actress doing some of her stunts, or at least a female stunt woman, which I always appreciate. But again, the interesting thing about that is as Sento is watching this, and she's clearly in danger, jumping out of windows and holding onto scaffolding, he's just kind of lackluster about it. He doesn't feel anything, any sort of urgency, and I don't get why that is. Now, even though Sawa was trying to come forward with this information about who had the panel from Pandora's box, it appears that both Nanba and Faust got in front of the story. So this kind of theatrical performance of sorts is put on to make the public believe that Faust is being eliminated, or at least being taken care of by the government. Now, this is the sort of thing that works in a lot of different medium, and it does work here. What I do want to go ahead and point out is that, again, the familiar filming location. Now, this is a familiar filming location. The dam that they're at during the raid is actually the same as episode 31 of Exade, where he and Genmu teamed up for the first time, so it's nice that they're still using these same locations. Now, as to why Ryuga sits this fight out, I'm not entirely certain, but the focus, of course, is on Build and a more proper debut of Pirate Train and his fight against Night Rogue, who, to the audience, we can clearly tell is not Gentoku. To the audience, we can see that that's somebody else, and we can hear that that's somebody else, but the whole point is for the people on site to believe that Gentoku is not involved. Resolved, which is why he's on one side and Night Rogue is on the other side, clearly being played by Utsumi. Now, as far as a form goes, Pirate Train doesn't really bring anything new to the battlefield. The addition of a new weapon, the Pirate Platform, is very similar to the Sonic Arrow from Kamen Rider Gaim that the Energy Riders would use. Although here, again, it doesn't bring much else other than being a kind of bow and arrow weapon. Now, it is worth noting that Utsumi is actually very capable as Night Rogue, but this does bring something else into question. If he's able to become Night Rogue, and we see Night Rogue earlier, as Gentoku, talked about his own hazard level, that would mean that, by definition, Utsumi's been exposed to this nebula gas, wouldn't he? In any case, Utsumi is knocked out of his Night Rogue form and reveals his identity to Sento, and Sento is also shown that Utsumi knew who he was the entire time. Now, it does seem that Utsumi may have had a change of heart about his feelings and everything, but he's shot by Gentoku before he can get any more words out. Now, the whole idea of this is, of course, to make Utsumi the fall guy, and to make Gentoku look even better in his position as Prime Minister now. Now, the whole reason for this is very similar to something you would see in Arrow, where Diggle will take the place of Oliver Queen to make it look like Oliver isn't the Green Arrow, same thing happening here with Night Rogue. Now we see that Sento has a new mission in trying to find the smoking gun between Nanba, Toto, and Faust, since they're all collaborating together. The important thing, of course, is yes, he's starting to realize that his strings have been pulled, and it's better that he realizes that now rather than later. And as if that wasn't enough, we see next episode Nabeshima is back, he remembers who actually set up Ryuga, and we're going to finally get that information. So we're finally going to see that mystery solved. But will that lead to more mysteries? Yes. So all in all in this episode, I appreciate that they're giving Sawa purpose. Now that she's been revealed as a spy, we can move past that and move forward. And I also appreciate that she's got a very good backstory that we can bite into. As far as Sento being more comical, I get it, but I don't think it was warranted in this episode the way they debuted it. As far as Ryuga goes, I appreciate how he's working as a writer, but he still needs to be characterized. It's cool that he can fight now in suit, but we still need to see him grow as a character, otherwise he's going to remain plateaued and not very enjoyable. But those, of course, are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about this. First off, Nanba. Since he has so much juice, do you think he'll go head-to-head with Gentoku directly, or is there a possibility that Nanba's got somebody else up his sleeve? Secondly, Sawa. Do you think it's better that they gave her a kind of tragic backstory with her father, or would it have been better if she was just an investigative journalist? And thirdly, Utsumi. Since we see that he's potentially been exposed to nebula gas in order to become Night Rogue, do you think it's possible that he'll become a writer later on down the road? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. Over on Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 12 of Writer Rebuild for episode 12 of Kamen Rider Build, Conspiracy Theory. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.